Welcome to everyone arriving right now, and you've just increased our attendance by 10%. We're grateful. So I've prepared a sermon. I'm going to preach it, but we're going to get out of here way before we usually do. I hope that's okay with everybody. I think it probably is. This is not the fewest people I've ever preached to, by the way. Looking back, I was reflecting. I think I can count on one hand in 38 years of times that we've canceled worship because of snow. I can think of one time in particular in Chicago when we got 24 inches of snow in like a day or a day and a half or something crazy, and we lost power in the church, and it's no church. And I'm not proud of this, but I'm going to say it. It's probably, I should be ashamed of myself, but I'm going to say it anyway. We lost power in the church for about 3 days, but somehow the heat still worked. So I got to be at the church alone for about 3 days, and I remember sitting there thinking, this is great. I love this. There's no people around. This is not something that I should be telling you, right? This is great. I also remember a time that I was on a mission trip in the summer, and we were on an Indian reservation, and we were doing good works, and Sunday came, and there was a small Presbyterian church on the reservation, and I preached. They invited me to preach. There were about this many there, right? And it was a small chapel. It was summer. The windows and the doors were open, and I was much younger then and cared a lot about everything. And I worked hard on my sermon, and I got up to preach, and it had a chapel with a fairly low ceiling. And I started preaching, and there was one of the, and I looked up and I thought, oh my gosh, look at that bird. And I thought it was a bird, but it wasn't a small bird, it was a very large bee. And you know how they bounce around, right? He would hit the ceiling and bounce like this, and I preached my 15-minute sermon, and everybody for the whole 15 minutes watched that bee. And there was a lesson in there somewhere. Okay, now with that out of the way, here's my thesis this morning on this third Sunday in Advent. Here's my thesis statement. Ready? We come to Bethlehem when we immediately, directly, and intuitively find God in the fabric of ordinary existence. That's my thesis statement. And I can tell by the look on your faces that you've got it memorized already. But even so, I'm going to say it again. This is my thesis statement. We come to Bethlehem when we immediately, directly, and intuitively find God in the fabric of ordinary existence. That's part of that thesis statement is the definition of mysticism. And you may not know this, but I'm telling you now, so now you will know it. You are called to be a mystic. I believe we all are, because the classical definition of a mystic is anybody who experiences God simultaneously, intuitively, directly, and immediately. Okay? And those are not sequential, they're simultaneous. All three things happen at once. We experience God immediately, right now. And this is outrageous grace. It's not just amazing grace, it's outrageous grace. God is available to you right now. And then you might ask, well, Pastor Jay, what do I have to do to earn the right to experience God? And then I get to say, nothing. It's grace. This is dangerous. Immediately, directly, you can experience God directly You don't need me, you don't need anybody else. I'm called to the ministry to help us do that. But the mystical experience is you experience God immediately and directly. And then lastly, intuitively. That's the part I think I like the best. We experience God intuitively, which means you're going to experience God in a different way than I am. You're going to experience God, let's say, for example, through a sonata or some piece of music by Mozart, and somebody else is going to experience God through a piece of music by Willie Nelson. Both people experience God, but differently. So here's my thesis statement. Now with that as background, my thesis statement is, we come to Bethlehem when we immediately, directly, and intuitively find God in the fabric of ordinary existence. Ordinary existence. We experience the extraordinary through the ordinary. This is what happened to the shepherds. As Robin just read it for us. They're out working in the fields. It's just another night. This is just another Sunday, right? Well, it's not. It's really cold out, and there's not many of us. But in many ways, we can run in. It's very seductive to think that it's just another day. That's what the shepherds, I'm sure, thought. It was just another night of work. And every Christmas I get to read this, and if you've not heard it before, here it is. I'm quoting from my favorite Bible commentary. Shepherding was a despised occupation during the time of Christ. A lot of people don't know this. Quote, shepherding was a despised occupation at the time. In the first century, shepherds were scorned as dishonest people who grazed their flocks on other people's lands. Therefore, Luke graphically pictures Jesus as one sent to the lowly and the outcast. It is to some of their number, shepherds, that the birth is announced. Something new and something frightening happened to the shepherds. Sometimes life begins as we move out of our comfort zone. There's an old phrase, there's a phrase, and I've got a refrigerator magnet that says it. Life begins at the end of our comfort zones. And it's been my experience that almost without exception, the times that I have found myself out of my comfort zone, it's not by choice. I get pushed out of it. And the shepherds are pushed out of their comfort zones. And sometimes life begins as we move out of our comfort zones. Sometimes by choice, often not by choice. And there it is again, here it is again. And I know we're a small group today, but I'm asking one of you extroverts to answer this for me out loud. And if you've been coming the last few Sundays, it should not come as a surprise. This is Luke's birth narrative. The first words spoken in the birth narrative are by an angel to the shepherds. You ready? Here's what does the angel say? Don't be afraid. And I remind you that the Greek there, it actually says phobetos, which is phobia. And a couple of weeks ago, and I'm touching on it again, We should have translated it. The angels should be saying, hey shepherds, don't get a phobia about this. That's not very catchy, is it? It's okay to be afraid. What the shepherds are saying is, it's not okay to get a phobia. Phobias are irrational fears. Don't get a phobia about it. It happens again, time and time again. You probably remember that the manger is a feeding trough, right? It's a feeding trough for animals. And every Christmas, I get to remember the high school girl in my youth group 1,000 years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth. In my youth group, we still keep in touch on Facebook. She has a wonderful first name of Cabrini. And I was serving a Presbyterian church in suburban Chicago that was a very affluent suburb. Vicki and Jay weren't affluent. We couldn't afford to live in that suburb, so we didn't. We also didn't want to, but anyway. We couldn't live where my church was because it was too expensive. We lived in the next suburb over. A lot of rich people. Great. Well, what I learned was even in the midst of great wealth, there are people struggling. And Cabrini was being raised by a single mom. There had been an acrimonious divorce, and the mom got the house in that suburb, but very little income. And Cabrini was born, she told me about this. She was in high school at the time. Cabrini was born to this mom, and the mom couldn't afford a crib. So Cabrini, the baby, spent every night for quite a few nights in a dresser drawer, right? Open. That's a manger. That's the message of Luke. Christ is prejudiced. Prejudiced in favor of those in need. Right? That's the message. Okay. I'm going to end with this. I read it to you last Christmas, and I'm going to read it to you this Christmas. And just so you know, I've timed it. It takes 5 minutes and 30 seconds to read it. So that's what you're in for. And I'm going to read it, and then I'll be done. This is from that favorite book that I've mentioned to you multiple times, I Thought My Father Was God, by National Public Radio. It's a collection of true stories. NPR called it the National Story Project. And they were inundated by people that sent them their true stories. And they were so amazed by it, they put some of them in a book. And this one is entitled Snow, and it's written by Juliana C. Nash of New York City. I knew it was snowing before I opened my eyes. I could hear the sounds of shovels scraping against the sidewalks. And there was that special quiet in the air that comes when the city is heavily blanketed with snow. I ran to the windows in the front room to have a look at the block, my domain. It must have been very early. None of my friends had made it to the street. Only janitors were moving about in the knee-deep snow. Relieved that I hadn't missed anything, I became aware that my sisters and brothers were now awake. I had no time to waste. If I hurried, I could be out there before any of my friends. I dressed myself in an assortment of hand-me-down winter woolens, but there would be no mittens to keep my hands warm. I had lost them earlier in the season. I was in a real dither as to what to put on my feet. My shoes no longer fit into my rubber galoshes. When was the last time you used that word in a sentence, galoshes? I could wear shoes or galoshes, but not both. I decided to go with 2 pairs of socks and the galoshes. As I was buckling them, I felt the presence of someone standing over me. It was my big brother, Lenny. He asked me if I wanted to go ice skating at the indoor rink in Madison Square Garden. I immediately scrapped my other plans. My 13-year-old brother was actually asking me, his 9-year-old sister, to go ice skating with him? Go? Of course I would go. But where would we get the money? Lenny said it would cost $1 to get in and rent the skates. Only 2 obstacles stood between me and going skating with my brother: the blizzard of 1948 and $1. The blizzard I could handle. It was the dollar that presented the problem. $1. The quest began. We returned some milk bottles, asked our mother for a nickel, begged our father for a quarter apiece, collected a penny or two from our coat pockets, discovered 2 coins that had rolled under the beds, and spotted a rare stray dime nestled in a corner of one of the 6 rooms in our cold water railroad flat. Eventually, fortified with a bowl of hot oatmeal and jamming the hard-earned coins into our pockets, we set out on a 20-block journey, a city mile. The wind-driven snow clung to every surface. Lenny and I pretended that we were in the Alps as we climbed over the 3-foot mounds of snow that had been shoveled to the curbs. It was our world now. A myriad of tiny snowflakes had shut down the city and kept the adults indoors. The skyscrapers were invisible behind a white veil of snow, and we could almost imagine that New York had been scaled down for us. We could walk right down the middle of 3rd Avenue with no fear of being run over. It was hard to contain our joy, the incredible sense of freedom we felt out there in the snow. The 12 blocks to 49th Street weren't difficult, but the long crosstown streets proved to be chilling. The harsh west winds blowing off the Hudson River made it almost impossible to push forward. I could no longer keep up with my brother. My playful imaginings were replaced by the gnawing cold of my feet. My head was uncovered, my mittenless hands were clenched in my pockets, and a few of the clasps on my galoshes had worked loose. I began to complain gently, not wanting to make a nuisance of myself because I was afraid that Lenny wouldn't ask me to go anywhere with him again. Somewhere near 5th Avenue, we stopped in a doorway to take refuge. I timidly told Lenny that my clasps were open. Lenny took his bare red hands out of his pockets and bent down to refasten the snow-crusted, icy metal clasps. Ashamed that Lenny had to take care of me, I stared straight ahead and saw the image of a man walking toward us through the chiffon curtain of snow. I was unable to tell how old he was. All adults seemed the same age to me, but he was tall, thin, and had a gentle, handsome face. He wore no hat. There was a scarf around his neck, and his overcoat, like ours, was caked with snow. I don't remember if he spoke to me or not. What I do recall is that he kneeled down before me, his face level with mine. I found myself gazing into soft brown eyes, feeling bewildered and mute. When he was gone, I felt his warmth in the soft wine-colored scarf that he had wrapped tightly around my head. I don't remember ice skating that day or how we got home. All my memory holds is the snow, the kindness of a stranger, and my big brother Lenny. We come to Bethlehem when we immediately, directly, and intuitively find God in the fabric of ordinary existence. Amen?